This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
In recent times, there have been new data released, again, from hard science, people crunching numbers that look at the lunar solar model for the precession of the equinox and say, well, wait a minute, that current model to explain the precession of the equinox using a lunar solar model is basically saying that there's like over 2,000 variables involved to try and calculate the precession of the equinox accurately. A new model, looking at the idea that we have an orbit based on two suns, is like 11 variables and much more simple and accurate to explain the reason why we have this breakdown of the heavens into 12 parts, and the view of our view of the heavens seems to change. Not because there's a wobble, but because a more complex thought, right? If we're in a binary orbit, that means that our sun is orbiting another sun. So if our sun is literally moving through space on an orbit around another sun, when they initially started looking into the idea of a planet X, they noticed what they called perturbations. All of the outer planets, even the probes that we were sending into space, had a gravitational pull being affected on them, and they couldn't account for where this pull came from. There's some large body or something that is affecting the orbit of the planets, even the probes we send into space, but we couldn't find out what it was. So over time, they said, well, we're going to stop looking for perturbations and start to use infrared scopes to locate extrasolar planets. When they did that, James, this was about 15 years ago. From there on, the game changed, because as soon as they flipped on all these infrared telescopes, they saw hundreds of new planets, literally just floating bodies that are out there. Now we have Xena, Quoar, Zedna. They demoted Pluto. Unfortunately, what's going on, James, is that all of these bodies that we're seeing, you have to choose one and then do a calculation of its orbit. We might have already have imaged Nibiru, but identifying which body it is and calculating its orbit, that hasn't been done. And if we ever find a planet that's 4 to 8 times the size of Earth, not 1,000 kilometers in diameter like Xena, Quoar, Zedna, these large ice balls floating around, but a very large planet, I definitely think that we would notice it. Not like what we hear on the internet today of people thinking Planet X is hiding behind the sun, or that they snapped a picture with their webcam somehow. There would be a very large astronomical community of just amateurs around the world that would easily pick up something 4 to 8 times the size of Earth. There have been a few detections where, they started to calculate the orbit and say, well, wait a minute, this definitely could be a part of our solar system. We need to do further observations of this body. Calculating the orbit of Nibiru can only be done from certain perspectives. And to understand where it might be in its exact orbit now is difficult to say. You couldn't just place it on the last time we had a cataclysmic event or the last time we had a visitation from beings from the sky. I don't really know. These things don't coincide. The interaction with these beings, supposedly recorded by the Sumerians, the Anunnaki, their visitation of the Anunnaki did not coincide with Nibiru being close by. And so for me, that's the part that I've always been more interested in, is the interaction with these beings, let alone, discovering their planet and their home world.
Sure.
I don't think we're quite there yet to actually know when it will return. The only math that I can put out there is based on the Sumerian creation tales, the Enuma Elish, and our understandings of the formation of our solar system. Just like in the Bible, it talks about there were 7 days of creation. The Sumerians have 7 stone tablets of creation as part of a larger tale, the Enuma Elish. And there it talks about, how Nibiru became a part of our solar system when the planets hadn't finished hardening. They were still not even a solid mass. So
wow.
we think about our solar system being, 4.7 billion years old when the planets started coalescing into hard mass. So 4.7 billion years old, if we divide that by the orbit of Nibiru, which is 3,600 years, that means Nibiru has been passing through the inner part of our solar system well over 1 million times.
Wow.
So it might not always have some large gravitational effect on us. And, that's the part that's a little bit harder for us, and we need to wait for our science to catch up. The other part of it, though, is to look into the past. And this is definitely another part of my 2-track interest into the ancient cultures is one, every culture around the world speaks of a time when they were interacting with beings that seemed to have the power of flight. They literally were either coming down from the skies or are depicted using technological craft in the skies. So the other part of that is they built these monuments, right? These megalithic monuments, every continent, and they seem to have been used as astronomical outposts to mark where they were in this larger cycle of time, as well as make current observations that, seem to guide and affect their life. So it's interesting to look down that path, James, and this kind of opens the door to the ancient astronaut theory, when what we can do is looking at a lot of these artifacts and things that were left to us from various cultures depicting beings in the heavens. There is a term, even in more modern times, that kind of puts it into perspective and allows us to have a little bit more clarity looking into the past, like the Sumerians and the Anunnaki. We have a term called cargo cult. And in more modern times, that developed when World War I and World War II, our American soldiers started to go over into remote areas of, South America, let's say Southern Africa and Australia and places like that. And we first interacted with Aboriginal tribes. The soldiers, they land in their prop planes and get out of the plane and light up a cigarette and hold out a voice recorder to the Aboriginal and record its voice and play it back to him. And the Aboriginal doesn't understand and even looks at the plane and thinks it's like a living creature of some kind. And so what happened, this term cargo cult, is the soldiers set up their various camps, and every now and then a plane would fly over and drop ship them supplies. And sometimes this bag of supplies wouldn't land in the soldier camp, it would land in the middle of the tribe. And the tribesmen crack open this bag of supplies, and it's full of food and guns and knives and lighters, and they're like, wow, it's gifts from the gods. They didn't understand.
Sure.
And so the soldiers eventually pack up their stuff and leave, and a very interesting phenomenon happens. The Aboriginals create straw models of the prop planes and literally scrape away runways and sit for hours at a time looking up at the sky, hoping to entice the beings, these people with their technology and these amazing living creatures, these planes, to come back and land once again. So they didn't understand the plane, but they left very accurate straw models of what they saw.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.
The right window treatments change everything. Your sleep, your privacy, the way every room looks and feels. At Blinds.com, we've spent 30 years making it surprisingly simple to get exactly what your home needs. We've covered over 25 million windows and have 50,000 5-star reviews to prove we deliver. Whether you DIY it or want a pro to handle everything from measure to install, we have you covered. Real design professionals professionals. Free samples, zero pressure. Right now, get up to 50% off with minimum purchase. Plus, get a free professional measure at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions apply.
And so that's what we can do, James, is go further into the past and look at artifacts that clearly are representations of power of flight. You know, planes and rocket ships and things that kind of defy what we would attribute to ancient man. What were interesting is they were labeled as golden insects. They're probably from around 500 to 800 BC. But what's interesting about them is that they don't look like insects. If you look at them, they have all of the intrinsic characteristics for a modern-day plane. 90-degree tail fin, wings outstretched, just like you would see at the space shuttle or modern-day prop plane. And even in Egypt, there were some of these found that they were put on display as a bird model. But when you look at it, it has all the characteristics of a plane and none of a natural feathered being or a feathered, like a bird. There was one artifact in particular that I was always interested in. It's called the headless spaceman, and I think you can Google it and find an image. But this was a device, or a little artifact, I should say, that was in Turkey, in one of the museums in Turkey. And the author, Zacharias Sitchin, went to the curator and said, listen, you don't have this thing on display, and it's clearly an ancient rocket ship. And if you look at it, it's literally a man with his knees bent, sitting in a little rocket. Now, unfortunately, his head seems to be missing. The artifacts, lost that piece. But if you look further back, there are literally even engines. It's identical to what our space shuttle looks like. Now, the curator finally did put this on display, and under pressure of Zacharias Sitchin, labeled it the Headless Spaceman, courtesy of Zacharias Sitchin, and left it on display. And I think they probably got some new business just because of that artifact. But a lot of the museums have very interesting collections of artifacts that they recycle. They don't keep all of their artifacts on display 100% of the time. They recycle their displays, kind of bringing things on and off the shelf. Possible, the way I look at it is probably a little bit more of a simple perspective. I did some very deep analysis of Mars in the Cydonia region, and what really struck me is that just like here on Earth, everyone loves waterfront property. We all love to live near a lake or live near the ocean,
For sure.
have a view of the water.
For sure.
We even sometimes create monuments. Like here in the United States, we have this thing called the Statue of Liberty, which is out in the water as a monument that you can see from the shore. And that's exactly what we have in Cydonia. All of the monuments that are around the face are on what appears to be an ancient land shoreline. Anyone who looks at the area of Cydonia can clearly see that the pyramids and all the other structures are literally right on a shoreline. It's very bright, knobby terrain. You can even make out a shoreline. But if you look at the face, it's very mellow. It almost looks like an ancient sea basin. The face appears to have been built right out on a shoreline so that all the structures on the shore would be able to look out at the face as a monument. Now, the face is not small. It's over 1,500 feet high and over a mile long on its longest side. So, I definitely think that it was a marker that could have been used as an outpost for recognition. As an example, if we look at Nazca, Peru, there's this huge edifice on one of the mountainsides called El Astronato. And it's the picture of a humanoid raising his hand as if he's saying hello.
Waving, yeah. Fascinating, yeah. This one, Jason. Fascinating.
Right. So you can only see El Astronato from the sky. So the same thing with the face. Yes, maybe there is some purpose that you can, it literally used to be situated right on the equator until the orbit of Mars changed. Now, it would definitely be something as a marker that would be easy to see. And they do speak of, the Anunnaki do speak of using Mars as a way station, of taking the gold they were mining here on Earth, using Mars as a way station before they transported it to Nibiru. And it is interesting to note, final comment, James, before I take a break here, is that If you look at the description of Earth by the Sumerians, Earth was called Ki, the seventh planet. The 7 days in a week, sacred number 7. Earth, if you're traveling from outside of our solar system you're going to pass by Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, and then Earth. We are on the 7th planet. Coming from outside of our solar system someone would say, oh yeah, you're on the 7th planet. And that's why all throughout archaeological references, there are these 7 dots with a crescent moon that represent us, Earth. Well, the interesting thing about that is that many of the early depictions of Nibiru is actually a cross, a glowing cross in the sky. There are cylinder seals that show them plowing a field and covering their eyes, and in the sky you see the sun as well as a glowing cross. And so throughout many of these ancient Sumerian cylinder seals and tablets, there is a representation of a large glowing cross in the sky. This representation of the cross seems to have evolved into the winged disc. And so various references of the Anunnaki and other Semitic languages, Akkadian, and all over the Middle East, you see this representation of an Anunnaki, if you will, sitting in a winged disc. Even throughout Egypt, like, Ra and Isis, various other gods seem to be depicting this winged disc as having the power of flight, and also symbolically possibly talking about the sun, depending on what culture you're coming from. There's definitely a time, just like when the Bible says that there were giants upon the earth. And it seems as if the Sumerian epic of time, 3800 BC, was an actual time when these beings are what we considered living gods, were living amongst us. Now, modern linguists and academia will look at this information from various cultures, but we'll talk about kind of ending here with just the Sumerians for tonight. The Sumerians were very specific, and if you ask them, how did you learn all of this knowledge of math and science and astronomy? They say everything we know, we were taught by the Anunnaki. And that term simply means those who from heaven come to earth. And so it appears that the Sumerians literally have stone tablets where they claim to have been with a scribe who could write on clay tablet and in cuneiform script, standing with a high priest, would literally sit in front of, an Anunnaki would be sitting in front of them and would bequeath sacred information to this high priest, and the scribe would be writing it down. In the form of astronomical data, again, we have thousands of tablets from 3800 BC, and some of them even a little older, where these high Sumerian priests recorded motions of the heavens and kept this over hundreds, sometimes thousands of years as sacred knowledge. So we can now see that with our sciences, everything that we can confirm, the Nibiru part not yet, but everything that we can confirm, we show them having very accurate knowledge of astronomical movements. They knew the distance between the planets, what the outer planets looked like as if you were in space, calling Uranus and Pluto mosh sea, bluish green. So, until we sent Galileo and the Voyagers in the late 70s and early 80s and took color pictures of the outer planets, what do you know? It matches the Sumerian descriptions from 3800 BC.
Wow.
So, yeah, they do have some presence to, be further looked into on some of these topics of the Anunnaki and Nibiru, because we can't fully discount, since everything else they said, our sciences have been able to confirm so far. Well, there is another angle that I am definitely upholding. I do see that, the Anunnaki, again, in every culture have these stories in their mythology of beings flying around in the skies and very accurate representations. But there could be another answer. When we talk about the lost cycle of time, this rise and fall of civilizations where we go into the dark ages and forget everything and then go into the golden age, what I also have been seeing is a consistent pattern of, let's call it a lost high civilization that did exist. Now, right now, we'd call that Atlantis, right? People would say that there was some advanced civilization and they sunk into the ocean.
Sure.
Well, what I'm seeing, James, is that every culture around the world, there are monuments on these continents that they can't explain who built them. And if you were to ask a lot of these ancient cultures, they all, especially when it comes to their astronomical data, all of these ancient cultures seem to reference some lost ancient civilization. And I'm going to get very specific here. If we look at some of the latest sites that we've been uncovering, for instance, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey.
Wow, yeah.
These rings of stone. They have beings depicted on the stone that are long, slender beings with their hands wrapped at the waist. Now, if we go to places like Rapa Nui, Easter Island, these what we thought were moai heads are actually full bodies, meaning the moai heads on Easter Island, they've scraped and dug down around the heads and found out that they're actually long, slender beings and hands wrapped at the waist.
Sure.
Even Sumerians had these depictions of figurines with these slender beings, hands wrapped at the waist. So what I'm starting to postulate, James, is that there could have been some lost ancient civilization, and that civilization, 10,000, maybe back to 50,000 BC, they were very advanced, possibly not entirely human. I don't know.
Yeah.
But every ancient culture that we revere today, Mesoamerica, like the Mayans, Egyptians, even in Asia and Vedics, they all seem to reference this lost ancient civilization, which definitely makes sense in the idea of a great year, a golden age, where in this cycle of time that repeats, we come to a higher state of evolution and learning and then forget it all. So that seems to be making more sense to me, James. Not just the aliens or the Anunnaki. I think it makes sense that if we're in the golden age, as the ancient Vedic texts talk about, we get to a point where we can actually interpret God, then yeah, we're probably interacting with space aliens and interdimensional beings, higher forms of existence that we just don't comprehend yet, or we've lost this knowledge. Well, what's the best evidence for ancient aliens or ancient technology? What's the one thing that can prove it? and I usually give them this answer. Well, I say, well, I don't know to prove it, but the best evidence that I have for high technology is a term called vitrification. Now, vitrification is a glassing effect when stone has been applied to high heat. And so all of these sites where we see these stones, megalithic stones in most cases, intricately connected with no mortar, you can't even slide a piece of paper between them, what we see is a glassing effect on the edges, vitrification. So the theory, James, is that somehow sites like Machu Picchu or Göbekli Tepe even, or, Pumapunku, some of these things in Peru, a lot of these sites, the stones seem to have been superheated almost to a lava-like state.
Tomorrow morning is knocking. Stock your fridge now. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or a sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
You mind if we make one more stop before heading back? I need to run a Target.
100%. Let's RTT. You thinking of stuff for the dorm?
Yeah, my mom gave me some good tips on must-have essentials. We for sure need underbed storage, handheld iron for wrinkles, maybe even a mini Keurig for Mondays. Am I right?
All right, bet. Because I was already thinking about keeping my clothes looking fresh at college, so you better be sharing that.
Of course, man. Whatever I get on this run is yours too.
Twin.
But for real, let's go before they close.
Find everything you need for college at Target.
If you can heat a stone to a lava-like state, then it becomes pliable, like putty. And if you were to heat up the stones and then stick them all together, they would harden into place, perfectly fit. That's the only explanation that we have as to how they were able to get these stones to be with such intricate patterns carved into them, fitting so closely together. And we see the evidence at the edging of the stones of this glassing effect from high heat. The question is, how did they heat the stones to a molten-like state? You'd really need some high-powered energy sources to do that, which we just don't attribute to ancient man. Don't say it's aliens. I definitely am leaning more towards the idea that through this great cycle of time, that we learn a lot of this technology and utilized it. We were probably using this world energy grid and tapping into energy. There's a gentleman named Dr. Michio Kaku, and he's created these civilization types where you get up to the point where you're, harnessing the energy of a star and things like that. Well, we're not even a type 1 civilization. We're still using fossil fuels and even killing each other and doing all these barbaric things. So I definitely think it's possible that as we go into these higher ages, into closer times around the Golden Age, that we probably have a much greater understanding of natural energy and things that we can, as you said, use stone and crystals and things that probably store energy a lot more efficiently than we understand now. Oh yeah, for sure. The Perry-Reese map and the Charles Hapgood and a few other maps that do exist, and they show very accurate topography of our complete, land masses, even in some regards showing what the land masses are under the ice sheet. And, I don't know of any flying craft in ancient times, not even hot air balloons. So for ancient man to have these maps, again, you can just Google the Perry-Reese map. These things are quite an anomaly because of their complete accurateness that we know today with our own aerial views and satellite imagery. If we think about the idea that the Sumerians claim the Anunnaki came from Nibiru, and they symbolize this as the 12th planet. They counted the 9 planets we know of, plus the sun, our moon, 10, 11, and Nibiru, the 12th planet. So the Sumerians are saying that their gods come from the 12th planet. Well, if you think about the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 disciples of Jesus, the 12 Greek Olympians, 12 hours in a day, 12 inches in a foot, 12 zodiacal heavens, symbols of the heavens, everything and all of that information, including our metric system and time and calendar, somehow came out of the Sumerian information of this breakdown of the heavens into 12 parts and the knowledge of this 12th planet. Now, maybe this comes from much more ancient times and other cultures did understand it, but for now, we put that on the shoulders of the Sumerians for giving them credit for having over 100 of the firsts needed for a high civilization. We're definitely still at a low point on this grand celestial clock called the precession of the equinox, of what we call it now. We're just coming out of the Dark Ages, and right now we're in what's called the Age of Pisces. In about 150 years, we'll go into the Age of Aquarius. But this is a little interesting piece so that people can make the connection here. We're in the Age of Pisces, which is the symbol of a fish. However, here in America, a lot of people put this symbol of a fish on the back of their car, and they think it symbolizes Jesus. They don't realize that the symbol of a fish is actually a much more longer history time for representing the Age of Pisces. Many cultures before the Christian understandings of Jesus wrote down and used the symbol of a fish to represent a zodiacal age of Pisces. So right now we're in the Age of Pisces. We're going to continue to come out of the Dark Ages here. We've done so. We're not in the Dark Ages anymore. We're in the Bronze Age, just leaving that, going into the Silver Age. And in about 8,000 years, we will re-enter the Golden Age. So we're quite a ways, but just as the Mayan calendar stated that in 2012 there would be this shift in time, we can literally see things exponentially speeding up. Our sciences and knowledge and even spiritual thirst is exponentially increasing. The Mayans said in 2012 there would be a time of great change. Well, if we think about some of the latest inventions and theoretical particles that we're discovering in CERN, the huge Hadron Collider, where we bombard at the subatomic level and discover particles, they theorized that in 2012 this happened. The Higgs boson, anyone can Google this, 2 new theoretical particles, the Higgs boson and the Higgs siglet, both theoretically possible to cause literally instant travel across time and space, instant communication, possibly into other dimensions, by looking at these theoretical particles that they're discovering through the Hadron Collider, and have to come up with an explanation to verify what they're seeing in their experiments. So it's possible that within our lifetime we will discover these Star Trek-like abilities to have warp speed and travel instantly between various vast distances in space. All this information is pointing towards this cycle of time. And, you know, the Egyptians, again, if we look at the wealth of knowledge in, for instance, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is like 800 pages, a lot of these things talked about esoteric knowledge where the pharaoh prepared his soul for the afterlife, where if they learned certain information in this life, when they passed into the next life, they could keep their kingship. That's pretty cool. I definitely think that there are lost areas of knowledge that our modern culture would be so thirsty for and will continue to want to learn as we peer deeper into the past and see that, you know, the Egyptians, as an example, we have 5 senses. They believed in 360 senses and somehow used their pineal gland far greater than we do today. It's almost like our pineal gland has shrunk down. So there's just a lot of information that people can look into. I definitely recommend, as a parting note, another video series called The Pyramid Code. And again, I think this whole idea is going to shift. Just as you mentioned, 26,000, that's the modern accepted term for the precession of the equinox. But some of these other models, again, where it possibly is based on a binary orbit, we would have to take the mean average of the orbit of what we see, that if there's 2 suns in orbit around each other, as they get close to each other, their orbit speeds up because of gravity. But then as they get farther away from each other, their orbit slows down. And so the average orbit could turn out to be a speed that's actually a 24,000-year cycle, which is more in alignment with the math of 12, 24, every zodiacal period being 2,000 years, roughly. We can only base things on our science right now, but we're very clear in also defining the fact that our current sciences and the way we put forth our hypotheses doesn't always encompass everything. Our physics can't explain everything. We're still learning as well. I'm definitely very surprised and grateful for the success. I think Ancient Aliens is definitely one of those shows that is helping make people be more open-minded, whether they think it's aliens or not. But looking at all this wonderful history and just kind of taking a different viewpoint that maybe there was something more to it, I think is very educational for people. I became involved gratefully because of my buddy Giorgio, you know, the guy with the hair.
Everybody knows Giorgio for sure. Giorgio
and I have been friends for 18 years, and I joke because when I met Giorgio, he was the right hand for Eric von Daniken. And he was, you know, 20 years ago at least, he had a 3-piece suit on and his hair was all slicked back. And I was more of a kind of a, you know, a young surfer guy with kind of flowing hair. And now our roles have switched. He's got the crazy hair and my hair is slicked back and I'm wearing a suit. But I've had great respect for Giorgio. And since he was always kind of under the umbrella of Eric von Daniken and I was always under the umbrella of Sitchin, now, as those 2 gentlemen's time is kind of coming to an end, Sitchin being gone and Eric retiring, Giorgio and I just have been really good friends over the years and had a common bond to look into these topics. And so I'm very grateful to have been asked to be a part of Ancient Aliens ever since season 1 and going well into the future with more episodes to come, from what I understand. Well, you know, I'll kind of give it just a little piece of something that's forming literally as I speak. I do have Ancient School, and people can check that out. But I'm also partnering with another site called AncientExplorers.com. And we'll probably actually be folding Ancient School into AncientExplorers.com. And there you'll still get the same content and interaction with top researchers. But we're also going to do voting from our community as to what locations you want to go to and have us research and possibly come along with us. So going to be planning some groundbreaking expeditions over the next couple of years and gaining access to some of these archaeological sites and relics utilizing technology. I'll kind of end it with this piece to give you an idea. NASA has a huge 747 filled with something called synthetic aperture radar. They recently flew it over Cambodia and found a whole new set of pyramids that were covered by the jungle and tarps. covered by shrubs and was actually partly buried. But using this synthetic aperture radar, we can fly over various locations and find things that are not easily seen, even on Google Maps, but doing low ground penetrating radar. So there are going to be new locations and things, kind of like Göbekli Tepe, that are going to pop onto the radar, and we're going to instantly go out there and deploy drones and various technology to get some really comprehensive data. When I was 21 in college, someone had mentioned to me that there was a face and pyramids on the surface of Mars. So I, as a college student, just was for some reason intrigued by this idea. I didn't quite believe that it was true, and started to do research into looking on various websites for, Malin Space Science Systems and Jet Propulsion Laboratories, NASA, Goddard Space Center. So, in college, I was just starting to become interested in what we're doing with various programs that were deploying packages into space. And just by coincidence, James, happened to find out that Malin Space Science Systems.
This episode is brought to you by Perfect Bistro Cat Food. Hey guys, today I'm interviewing my cat about his perfect bistro food. Percy, you seem to be a big Perfect Bistro fan. Care to comment? Totally. What do you like about it? You love the high-quality ingredients? And the delicious flavors, of course. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Listen to Percy, guys. Visit perfectbistro.com to try it for your cat.
When you're a mid-sized business, you need every competitive advantage you can get. Like an AI solution that works for you, not against you. SAP Grow is built with AI embedded at its core, working across every system. And it's ready to go from day one, so you can hit the ground running. Bring it with SAP Grow, AI Cloud ERP for any size business.
That controls most of the orbiters that we have going to Mars.
Wow.
Was also located in San Diego, where I was attending college. So, I called Dr. Mike Malin just as a layman college student and asked him, in this region on Mars called Cydonia, are the face and pyramids artificial? And he said, well, no, these are all natural sand and weather-eroded objects, nothing to see here. So I was able to, look further into these topics and find other people that had PhD level credentials for satellite telemetry analysis. Maybe they didn't work at NASA, but a few of these people had published data. One person in particular, a Dr. Mark Carlotto, that he was using these mathematical algorithms. He called it a fractal analysis. He'd run his mathematical algorithms over satellite images of Russia, and with his math, he was able to determine, oh, those are tanks or troops being hidden by a tarp or by some shrubs.
Wow.
And so Dr. Carlotto ran these same mathematical algorithms from the satellite telemetry over Mars. The face and pyramids came out to be around 98% probability that they're artificial.
Wow.
So it was stuff like that that kind of initially sparked my interest into the face and pyramids. But then I quickly realized that, there's structures all over our planet, let alone on Mars, that we still can't quite explain. And so that's what really kind of kickstarted my initial interest into trying to figure out, where do we come from? Even with our own images of the moon or various things like Mars, when we go back into the 50s and 60s and look at a lot of the data that NASA put forth publicly, you can see where they scrubbed out or smudged out certain things that for whatever reason they didn't want to have, in the public. So now we can definitely look back on those images that they all correct it now using computer systems, servers and stuff. But the images back then were all done by hand. And so it's a lot easier to recognize a lot of these things just from a layman's eye. You can look at the satellite images and go, well, why the heck did they smudge that area out there on the right? So it's kind of an interesting perspective for sure. What Plato called the Great Year, what over 30 cultures seem to reference the idea that there were two suns, that we actually have a binary orbit, two suns. There seems to be a lost knowledge base of a larger cycle of time. Right now, in modern terms, we call it the precession of the equinox. the reason why there's the constellations of the heavens broken down into 12 symbols. And we pass through these eras every 2,000 years. There's a total of 12, so 2,000 times 12, 24,000 year cycle. So we'll get into that topic, James. But I think from a high level, yes, there's definitely not a linear. It seems to be more cyclical. But what we see, and this kind of, I'll even answer it with kind of tying in this cyclical answer here. What we see is that we seem to be just relearning a lot of the information that was lost to us in the Dark Ages. But if we go back several thousand years, as you mentioned, to ancient Egypt, 2500 BC, or Sumer, 3800 BC, what we find are eras of high technology, knowledge of astronomy, knowledge of mathematics. Things like one of the artifacts you mentioned, the Antikythera mechanism. They think it's about 2,000 years old. They found it off the coast of Antikythera near Greece there by some sponge divers. And it's more complicated than a modern-day Swiss watch. It has over 35 cogs and wheels, possibly up to 70. This is what they see under radar. And it's essentially just an ancient computer. It was in some type of a box, and the Antikythera mechanism was theorized to have two uses. One, it was an astronomical device so that a ship captain could kind of use this box and tune it towards a certain area in the sky and use it as a way to navigate, because it would be able to turn and understand the motions of the heavens. The other way was just as an astrological device where you could say, oh, you were born on June 4th, 1972. Well, Mars and Jupiter were aligned then, and this means yada, yada, yada. So they used it as an astrological as well as an astronomical device. But the point is, James, right, it's 2,000 years old.
Yeah.
Very complicated. And, who could have built that? And there's several artifacts like that we can kind of throw out there for the discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Baghdad battery, I know you've made a replica of this one as well. That was great to see that, by the way, Jason. Tell us about the replica, why you made the replica. Was this to educate people in a practical sense and say, look, this is what they had, and instead of looking at images and graphs, we actually have a tangible Baghdad battery that you made, Jason?
I made it for two purposes. The first purpose is simply that the mainstream view of the Baghdad battery is that they've discovered about 12 of them so far in the Middle East area, mostly in Iraq, and it's a clay pot. It's about 4 to 6 inches tall, 2 to 3 or 4 inches in diameter. It's not very big, and what you would do is if you fill it with any weak acidic acid, grape juice, vinegar, wine, it's got a copper rod, a copper lining and a little iron rod that when you mix an acidic acid with this copper and iron, they will create an abundance of electrolytes, and you can literally create an electrical current. So mainstream science acknowledges that it was a battery, but they only give two hypothetical theories for what it was being used for, which in their own right are still kind of cool. First one was ancient man would use the Baghdad battery to heat up, let's say, gold or silver, passing this electrical current that it would generate into a little pool of gold or silver so that they could spray it over an amulet or a necklace to coat it with gold or silver. The other way was they would create a slightly larger version, sometimes 2 or 3 or 4 feet high, fill it with a bunch of grape juice or wine, and then put it behind a statue in the church. And so they would connect it to the statue's surface in such a way that they would create a buildup of static electricity.
Wow.
And you'd enter into the church, and the statue of the god would have kind of a hum. So an alternative view to electroplating jewelry or creating a static charge in a religious sense, for the awe, was it was an actual power source, because in that same time frame of 2500 BC, in Egypt, in an area called Dendera, we find what appear to be the reason and answer for why there's never any evidence of flame or soot in some of these tombs and crypts where there's intricate wall reliefs and hieroglyphics. So the alternative theory that they were using instead of copper mirrors or a torch was they actually had light bulbs, literally ancient light bulbs. So I just simply came up with the Baghdad battery's working model, as well as creating a relief of what we see in Dendera on the wall, any type of glass filament with a low methane gas, meaning swamp gas. You could just fill a glass jar with swamp gas and then introduce a light electrical current, and you'll get phosphorescence light. We've even had reports here in the United States in the way back of UFO sightings that were misidentified swamp gas being ignited by a small energy source, like a spark of lightning or what have you. So there are natural occurrences that could explain that the Egyptian culture in 2500 BC was literally using low light power sources and combining that with a power source being the Baghdad battery. Well, the mainstream Egyptologists actually explain the representation of them holding that bulb as they're holding the lotus flower, and that filament you see coming out is literally just the aroma of the flower. Nibiru, from all the information that I've looked into, is a planet that's 4 to 8 times the size of Earth in a very large elliptical orbit around our very still active sun. But because it has such an elongated orbit, the Sumerians actually gave it a depiction which they called Shar, a completed circle. But the orbit of Nibiru seems to take it way, way out, well beyond the Oort cloud, which is another asteroid belt that we have billions of miles beyond Pluto. I think that based on what I've seen as far as evidence, that Nibiru probably does exist, but it has an orbit that takes it around 2 suns. So, locating Nibiru, I think, is a different topic that we could talk about. But focusing on the idea that we have a binary orbit, there has been a lot of research to suggest at a scientific level that there's possibly some type of a planet that does periodically orbit our second sun and dislodges debris and asteroids and things, because any large body, let's say a planet 4 to 8 times the size of Earth, if it passes through the Oort cloud, again this huge asteroid belt billions of miles beyond Pluto, if it passes through any type of large asteroid belt.
If data management is slowing down your business, you need the Intuit ERP. If one entity is here and one here and one here and one here, you need the Intuit ERP. If scaling your business feels like starting over, you need the Intuit ERP. Intuit Enterprise Suite is the AI-native ERP solution that consolidates, migrates, and automates, all in one place. Learn more at intuit.com/ERP.
This episode is brought to you by Adobe Firefly, the all-in-one creative studio with AI-powered image and video generation. Built for today's creative process, Firefly helps you generate, edit, and experiment fast. Because the asks aren't getting smaller, and the timelines? Still tight. With all the best creative AI models in one place, Firefly brings your ideas to life. Learn more at adobe.com/firefly.
Little comets and asteroids and things are going to become gravitationally attracted to this body, and it's going to come along with it. There was a gentleman named Dr. Richard Mueller here at Berkeley in California, and he theorized a planet that he called Nemesis. And wow. This was a way he was explaining the extinction of the dinosaurs, that periodically, over millions of years, there was this planet he theorized called Nemesis that would dislodge debris from the Oort cloud and bring it directly into the inner part of our solar system. And that's why we see, like our moon and various other planets within our solar system, the surface has been inundated by debris and asteroids and comets impacting the surface. So, there have been a lot of research to look into this idea that, one, there's possibly some other large body, a planet X, a nemesis, or the ancient term of a Nibiru that's attached to our solar system. But the idea that we're binary is really the key for me of what I'm more interested in, James, for 2 reasons. One, most of the ancient texts, there was a great book called Hamlet's Mill.
Ah, yes.
And so over 30 cultures reference the idea of this dual sun mentality. And so aside from that, we also have the Hindus, some of the most ancient texts that come out of these Vedic scriptures, where, 10,000 years ago, they recorded information, and now it's been passed down. But the source of this information is very hard to use from a scientific perspective. They claim, these ancient Vedic texts say that they are able to tap into the knowledge of the universe just through meditation and learn a lot of these scientific truths about the orbits and things that are taking place, why we have a rise and fall of civilizations here on Earth. And they called it the cycle of the yugas. Plato called it the Great Year. Mm-hmm. Various other cultures, even like the Mayans, were aware of these larger cycles of time.
Still waiting in line? Again? That's time you'll never get back. Save time and money with Stamps.com. Over 4 million businesses have skipped the line with Stamps.com. Join them to save up to 90% off carrier rates from your computer or phone right now. Print postage for certified mail, registered mail, and packages in seconds. Then schedule a pickup right from your home or office. For a limited time, go to Stamps.com and use code PODCAST for a free welcome gift. Taxes and fees apply.
In the U.S., there's a break-in every 26 seconds. But when intruders step near, Simply Safe Home Security steps up.
Stop. This is Simply Safe. Police are on the way.
Using AI alerts, U.S.-based live agents help deter break-ins. Simply Safe, no long-term contracts. Save 50% on your new system with professional monitoring at simplysafe.com/Spotify or with promo code Spotify.
Outdoor deterrence requires a Simply Safe Active Guard outdoor protection plan starting at $49.99 a month. Visit simplysafe.com/licenses for alarm license information. Tennessee 2012.